Why We Must Never Forget by Norman Y. Mineta. February 15, 1992. I am proud to join you here today. Very proud. The fact that our nation, the United States of America, has now apologized to us for our internment 50 years ago tells me how much this nation has changed, and that the changes have been for the better. With those changes have come understanding, reflection, and the recognition that basic human rights either apply to us all or they belong to no one. However, there is no escaping another truth, that the specter of racism is lurking in us all. It was here in California and the West Coast 50 years ago that our life as a community was forever transformed by an attack that struck at the heart of the U.S. Constitution. This was an attack not of our making, but 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., the government of the United States, our government, decided that Americans of Japanese ancestry were a categorical threat to the United States. No matter that these threats were unproven, or that we were either American citizens or permanent resident aliens, all were tarred with the same indiscriminate brush of racial hatred and fear. We were all scared, those of us who were alive at the time. The entire world was at war. The United States had been brought into this war, the Second World War, after the Empire of Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941. One of the first casualties of that attack was faith and trust within our American nation. America quickly saw little value in distinguishing between the attackers that Sunday morning and loyal Japanese Americans who were every bit as much the target of that dawn air raid in Hawaii. All too much effort was invested instead in expedience, and the search was on for scapegoats. One by one, Japanese American communities along the West Coast disappeared, removed into stark, barren camps scattered throughout some of the most inhospitable regions of the United States. The myth that this forced relocation was being done for our protection was a lie, exposed by the first sight of Camp Guard towers, with their machine guns pointed in at us instead of out. Tens of thousands of us spent up to 4 long years in these camps. The vast majority of us cooperated with our government, determined to prove our loyalty in the long run, by sacrificing peacefully, in the short run, our most basic rights as Americans. And we served this country well, far above and beyond the call of duty. Internment drained and crippled many Japanese American families. Homes, farms, and businesses were lost. Lives were ruined. The result was that once the war had ended and the camps were closed, we tried to forget the internment. Parents never spoke of it to their children. But here there was an inescapable contradiction. How can you prove your loyalty once and for all, as we tried to do, if you allow personal justice denied to stand silently in a specter of shame? The answer is you can't. And the lesson I learned was that wronged individuals must stand up and fight for their rights if our nation is to be true to its principles, without exception. That's what our successful effort to redress the internment was meant to do. For me, that 10-year struggle in Congress won back for us our dignity. In the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, it says, and I quote, "The Congress recognizes that, as described by the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, a grave injustice was done to both citizens and permanent resident aliens of Japanese ancestry by the evacuation, relocation, and internment of civilians during World War II. As the Commission documents, these actions were carried out without adequate security reasons and without any acts of espionage or sabotage documented by the Commission, and were motivated largely by racial prejudice, wartime hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. The excluded individuals of Japanese ancestry suffered enormous damages, both material and intangible, all of which resulted in significant human suffering, for which appropriate compensation has not been made. For these fundamental violations of the basic civil liberties and constitutional rights of these individuals of Japanese ancestry, the Congress apologizes on behalf of the nation. That last sentence means more to me than perhaps any other in law, for it represents everything that our government is designed to do when it works at its best. And today, 50 years after Executive Order 9066 was signed, the successful effort to redress that wrong stands as a reminder of what ultimate accountability can and should mean in the United States. It should mean truth. It should mean justice. And it should mean universality of the rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. But today we must remain vigilant to ensure that these truths hold true for our children and grandchildren. The most recent wave of Japan bashing and America bashing holds for us a special danger. Those who prefer not to learn from the mistakes of the past, those who prefer a jingoism of hate, those who prefer to seek scapegoats, continue to pose a threat. The war in the Middle East last year demonstrated how genuine a concern this is for every minority community. In 1942, Japanese Americans were threatened and interned. But in 1991, when Arab Americans were threatened, there were voices within government and without to bear witness. We helped stop history from repeating itself. None of us can predict who might next fall target to hysteria, racism, and weak political leadership. But with our strength of conviction and witness to history, I do believe that we can ensure that such a tragedy as our internment never befalls anyone ever again here in the United States.